The reason why we talk about rotation is that we have put too much premium on the presidency. The presidency, and I think it is Chinua Achebe who wrote about in his little book in 1983, The Trouble with Nigeria, which could very well be with the trouble with Africa. That a president is like a person who holds the knife and the yam. Depending on how you behave, they can give you a little slice and you celebrate them. Your typical African president is a demigod. And because they are demigods, and the reason why they become demigods is that we ourselves treat our presidents as if they were gods. Then they get used to being treated as gods, and they don't know how to behave because you have made them gods. But if we created an environment where the presidency was about service delivery, people would not even want to stay in the presidency for a long time. Because as Julius Kambarage Nyerere once said, and I agree with him, you are not successful until and unless your successor succeeds. That is what is important. And there is something that happened in Ethiopia recently, which I think was very good. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia, having recognized that there was problem, decided to resign. He's a young man. He had not even attained the age of 50. He voluntarily resigned and allowed somebody else to take over. And that, I think, begins to demystify power. That is what we should do. And when we do that, and there is beauty in living in a country where you have 5 presidents who have served, you have a reservoir of knowledge. You go to Tanzania today, you have President Ali Hassan Mwinyi, retired. You have President Benjamin William Mkapa, retired. You have Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete, retired. So that when John Pombe Magufuli has a problem, he has 3 individuals who have served and have done well and have made mistakes to go to. That I think is a good thing. And I think that progressively we are going to move in that direction. But every country must choose its path in that direction. And the reason why I think that we ought not to judge ourselves too harshly is because our histories are rife with attempts at destabilization. Even as we speak now, there is a new power that is rising in a very subtle way and in a very subterranean way called China. China is a leviathan, and it moves very stealthily, giving us money without asking questions. They are doing certain good things. We can emulate a number of things from them. But think of Uganda, think of Africa 20 years from today and how it will relate with China. China is already thinking on how to relate with Africa 100 years from today. But we don't know how we are going to relate with China tomorrow. We are simply wondering what we used to listen to a great African called Samora Moises Machel. Samora had a clarion call. Listen to his speeches. He would say, "Aluta continua," and people would say, "Aluta continua." Then he would ask, "Aluta continua contro che?" The struggle continues for what? Because we can continue struggling, but for what? And I think that that is the fundamental question. Aluta continua for what? For the improvement of the critical majority of the people. And I behold the view that in a democratized system, you are able to lift the majority of the people out of poverty. When people are liberated from thinking about where to source the next meal, their thinking capacity and power to make decision changes. As I grow older, I realize that criticism for its own sake is not wisdom. And what I choose to do is to speak with the firmness that opens my opponent's eyes, not with the arrogance that inflames their anger. And I think that as you grow older and you make mistakes, you begin to recognize that you can use your knuckles, but you wear gloves. And when you do that, you present things a little differently. The way I used to speak as a second-year university student is very different from the way I speak now, but I say the same things. So, first, I hold the view that democracy is a competition of ideas, and democracy is sustained by constant constructive dialogue where the minority have their say and the majority have their way. And if one understands democracy in that way, one can then appreciate that it is incumbent upon the political party that is in power to continuously and constructively engage the politician or the political parties out of power. And that is the essence and the value of the parliament that we have. Parliament is a latter-day representation of the barazas or the meetings that we had in our societies. But it must also be recognized that in many African countries, we are artificial countries. We find ourselves in a geographical space called Uganda. Not because we chose to be within Uganda, but we were gridlocked into the space called Uganda, and we have made a conscious decision that we do not want to deconstruct Uganda, but we want to construct Uganda. Is it a thing that can be achieved during our lifetime? If you think so, you are deluding yourself. I hold the view that Uganda or any African country is a going concern. 400 years from today, our children and children's children will refer to what we are doing now, and they will be able to say that we, after 400 years, have succeeded in building a country called Uganda where there's unity in diversity, and we can then decide our issues in a manner that is beneficial for the majority of the people. And that is why I think introducing what we have called hygiene in politics is critical. These are toddler countries. African countries are toddler countries. The modern African nation are toddler countries which find themselves in a very difficult space. Do not cheat yourselves that other countries have no interest in Africa. Many countries actually thrive on destabilizing Africa. These observers that you see coming from Europe and America during election times, they have an interest, which is substantive. When the EU comes here, like prefects and overseers, they are coming to look at their fiefdoms. And it is our duty not to perpetually blame them, but to liberate ourselves. And quite a number of countries are already moving in that direction. Secondly, there is something that we can learn from those countries. The European democracies have made enough mistakes, and they have corrected those mistakes, and they continue to make others. So our journey towards stability should be shorter than theirs, because we have had the advantage of seeing the things that they have not done right. The tragedy is that we are not learning as we should. There are examples, and I hear the good doctor here, in European countries where money was used anyhow. They now recognize that that actually distorts democracy and undermines democracy. How does it do so? It then creates an environment where you can create narco states, and it happened in Latin America, where drug peddlers were now controlling the state, and you do their bidding. So we've got to sanitize our politics, and this is how I understand the laws that we are talking about. I hear you that we cannot count money in your room, but we are saying that on average, a parliamentarian or an individual contesting for a parliamentary seat in Uganda should expend so much money for items that are known and from sources that are known. We believe that if we walk that path for several years, we will create an environment where you spend money on, if it is advertisement, if it is publicity, if it is material, we know where the source is. We don't want a situation where somebody comes here with billions of Ugandan shillings and then buys their way into parliament, and they get into parliament, and then they subjugate our interest to their own. Then we become private property. And that is why I think a law such as this is critical. Not that it will solve all our problems, no, but it is the beginning of the solution to our problems. The other thing that has been said, which I think is worthy of understanding and appreciating, is democracy. You know, Africa must now begin to ask very basic questions going forward. How do we govern ourselves? Is there one word or one size fits all democracy? I don't think so. I believe that the uniqueness of our nation justifies a mixture of systems. In Uganda, prior to 1986, or rather immediately after independence, we know that the traditional methods of governance sat pretty alongside what one may call Western model democracy. We now know that after 1986 and the restoration of the kingdoms in Uganda, there is a sense in which the traditional chieftaincies or kingdoms are subsisting in an environment that is not wholly in line with those systems. Can we devolve and devise a system that accommodates that? It is happening in Nigeria. It is happening in Ghana. It is happening in Malawi. It is happening in South Africa. It is happening in Lesotho. It is happening in Eswatini, which used to be called Swaziland. In other words, there is no one-size-fits-all democracy. As long as the people have the opportunity to participate in the governance system. And I don't have a solution. I think this is a conversation that we must engage in. Our universities must now begin to engage in this kind of things so that they are not ivory towers. And I have had many presentations as one travels across Africa that are beginning to recognize that we had different methods of governance which can be used to good effect and will allow for participation. My good friend talked about what she described as proportional representation, so that we do away with one party, first past the post electoral system. These are ideas that must come. And we are very young as modern state. The oldest African state that was colonized and regained our independence is Ghana in 1957. So there is a sense in which we shouldn't judge ourselves too harshly. The other thing that has been talked about is rotation.